Jesus left that place and went away to the district of Tyre and Sidon. Just then, a Canaanite woman from that region came out and started shouting, "Have mercy on me, Lord, Son of David. My daughter is tormented by a demon." But he did not answer her at all, and his disciples came and urged him, saying, "Send her away, for she keeps shouting after us." He answered, "I was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel." But she came and knelt before him, saying, "Lord, help me." He answered, "It is not fair to take the children's food and throw it to the dogs." She said, "Yes, Lord, yet even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from their master's table." Then Jesus answered her, "Woman, great is your faith. Let it be done for you as you wish." And her daughter was healed instantly.
I once heard the woman referred to in this story as uppity. She certainly wasn't afraid to ask for what she wanted. After all, she'd made quite a long journey in the north down to Galilee in search of this healer, whose reputation was clearly spreading far afield. She'd come out of her own comfort zone in order to find the help for her daughter that she so desperately needed. Her poor daughter seems to have suffered from some form of epilepsy, which threw her into terrible convulsions. And in thinking of that time, she was deemed to be in the grip of demonic possession. How terrible for her mother. But the woman, coming from Gentile territory, was not Jewish. And so Matthew, writing with a Jewish readership in mind, suggests that for Jesus this presented a particular challenge. Surely the first priority of Jesus was to proclaim the good news of the kingdom to those who'd been waiting for so long for the promised Messiah, the Jewish people. So how was he to respond to the pleading of this Gentile mother? Perhaps Jesus hesitated for a moment. Matthew tells us that at first, Jesus didn't answer at all. Perhaps he was thinking. But his disciples were in no doubt. "Send her away," they said. Jesus seems to reflect to himself, "Wasn't I sent to the lost sheep of the house of Israel?" But the woman pleads again. But then follows quite a sparky bit of dialogue between them, banter apparently, but with an underlying seriousness. Jesus pictures a dining table and the children sitting round it who are perhaps fussy eaters, who've rejected the food that was given to them. "This isn't what we wanted," they might have said. "So what is to become of the good food that's been prepared for them? Is it to be given to the dogs?" "Well, why not?" suggests the woman. "Even the dogs under the table know what they're entitled to, if those for whom it was tended have turned their noses up at it." This story comes in Matthew's Gospel as tension has been building between Jesus and the Jewish authorities, as he criticises them for their lack of understanding of what God really desired from his people, and their presumptuous attitude in assuming that they were God's favourites. Yet they, in fact, are the spoiled children who failed to appreciate what God was giving them in his Son. And their hearts are closed to those outside their own boundaries, for whom they have only contempt. The Gentile woman, though, is astute. She sees the way Jesus is thinking. She understands what he's implying. She knows that the Jewish people assume that they are the apple of God's eye, his chosen people, always privileged to be at the front of the queue when blessings were being given out. She is a Gentile, entitled to none of those privileges. Yet she seems to sense that somehow things are changing, that a new kingdom is emerging, which will be based not on the privilege of birth into a particular nation, but on faith in the one whose help she is seeking. And so she challenges Jesus to go beyond those boundaries, and she sees, and to see that his mission is not only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel, but to all people. So Jesus praises her for her insight. Great indeed was her faith. And perhaps it was her faith that helped him to realise that his message of hope and healing was for everyone. I see words behind me in Flourish House say to us, love bade me welcome, and that love bids everyone welcome. It's so easy for all of us to stay within our comfort zones. Perhaps even Jesus was tempted to at first. We all need an impertinent outsider to challenge us and say, what about me? Don't I matter in God's kingdom? In the Old Testament reading, which is set for today, Isaiah the prophet sees God delighting in the fact that the foreigners who join themselves to the Lord, these I will bring, says God, to my holy mountain, and make them joyful in my house of prayer. For my house shall be called a house of prayer for all nations. As William Temple famously said, the church is the only human institution which exists for the benefit of those outside it. And we need constantly to remind ourselves that there is a wideness in God's mercy. But we make his love too narrow by false limits of our own, and we magnify his strictness with a zeal he will not own. For the love of God is broader than the measures of man's mind, and the heart of the eternal is most wonderfully kind. Whenever we try to restrict God's activity to our own expectations, we shall be disappointed and surprised. His plans for the world are much bigger than our small vision allows. So let's embrace the challenge and see how he will surprise us. Amen.